And welcome back to the third in this short-lived 4-episode series, the review of the final 4 episodes of Game of Thrones here on the JB's Driving Podcast Network. The last 2 episodes I rant and rave, those being about the Battle of Winterfell and then subsequently the last of the Starks. And I rant and rave because I was very upset in a series that we've all been emotionally invested in for the past 9 years. I'm not going to rant and rave this time. This episode, The Bells, I think it was entertaining. But just because it was entertaining doesn't mean it was good. It doesn't mean that it's lived up to what it should be, the legacy of the Game of Thrones. And it is a legacy. It is a legacy. This will go down like MASH did. This will go down like all the TV series that have been really looked upon finally in the past. I mean, since television was introduced into the American household. Again, just because it was entertaining doesn't mean it was good. I mean, movies like Broken Arrow were entertaining. Doesn't mean they were a good movie. So I think there's a couple of things to criticize about the series before you get into The Bells, the episode itself. And that's the fact, and it's starting to be written about, and that's the fact that this season really needed to be extended to a couple more seasons. You can see that in the character development, the sudden character development, which I will get to a little bit later here, and the overall connection with the characters and how they're growing. It's been very retarded by the fact that it's been rushed, and it's apparent that it's been rushed. And along with the fact that it's been rushed, it's also been hurt by David Benioff and Weiss's inability to understand story arcs. And what do I mean by that? Look at the way that they've taken the idea of subversion, of surprise, and really put it prominently in these past episodes, especially since Martin's work ended and theirs kind of taken over. They don't have that to rely upon. They don't have that crutch. So we've seen the idea of subversion with Arya killing the Night King, among others, really take the forefront and completely destroyed character development, the character arcs. And that's really hurt this series because this series is so character-driven. So character-driven. It's story-driven to an extent, but the characters really, the characters really drive us. So with that being said, let's look at the episode itself. And we first have Dany being upset because she's upset with Jon, Tyrion. She wants the throne. And now that the secret of Jon's lineage being out there, she's devastated. Devastated. Again, this is the all of a sudden flip to her going mad. I said this before. I'm going to say it again in my Twitter feed is Dany hasn't experienced anything different than we've experienced as human beings. She lost her best friend. One of her pets got killed. Her boyfriend no longer wants to be with her. And, people don't like her. That's something that we all go through, and she eventually goes postal, which we'll touch on in a little bit here. So I'm kind of, And again, this goes to why this series needed to be longer. This season needed to be dedicated to the Night King. We spent, since episode 1, dealing with the White Walkers and the Night King. As soon as episode 3 is finished, you don't hear from him anymore. Don't hear about it. The ramifications of that battle aren't even seen. They're not even experienced after episode 3. You don't see the psychological effect on any of the characters at all. Specifically Jon Snow. There is no dynamic change in Jon Snow. And again, that's what Season 8 should have been about. It would have allowed real writers, maybe Cogman, who is the backup writer, to develop flesh out these characters more after a very traumatic battle. It would have allowed them to flash out Dany as she's slowly going mad. And there are hints earlier on in the series where she could go mad. I will give the writers that. But again, that's when our boy Martin was still more heavily involved. So Dany's really upset, and you have Varys, a fantastic character. Again, character-driven. Varys, a fantastic character. As Jon is landing on Dragonstone, Varys goes up and runs up to him and says, "Jon, you need to backstab Dany." Again, completely against the Varys character, the Master of Whispers, the Spy Master. He's going to go out there and literally in daylight and tell Jon, "You need to overthrow your love." Well, Varys essentially ends up dead. Gets blown apart by Drogon's Dragonfire. And my criticism of this show, among others, this episode has to do with the many character deaths you see and how these characters that we're seeing dying, unlike the episode where Night King invades Winterfell, these characters are characters that we've seen since episode 1. And because of the multiple deaths, their deaths aren't nearly as impactful. Not nearly as impactful. Doesn't any intelligent person in that writing room realize, you know what, if we cram all these deaths in, they're not going to mean something to the people who are watching. And guess what? They didn't. They didn't. It was lost. Varys should have died in his own episode. If we're going to go through the murderer's row and kill off everybody, at least spread them out. At least spread them. They cannot do that. As a writer, you need to have that impact on the audience. They're not having an impact. So Varys is dead, and I will say the best scene in this entire show, this episode, was Tyrion and Jaime. I really think Dinklage and Nicholas did a great job here, and they always have. Their rapport through the entire series has been fantastic, and I will say hats off to that. Now we head to the battlefield. Remember last episode when the scorpions that Qyburn built, those gigantic crossbows mounted on Euron ships, the heat-seeking scorpion bolts were able to kill off Dany's other dragon just like in 3 shots, didn't miss a single one. Well, here we have a completely incompetent navy. Not just Greyjoys. In the prior episode, it was a detachment from the Iron Fleet. We have his entire Iron Fleet there, waiting in the bay, all facing the same direction. And apparently they can't hit the broadside of a barn because as the dragon comes down, who is all of a sudden superpowered. Another inconsistency is the power of these dragons. I mean, shoot, in episode 4, you don't know how strong. You think they're vulnerable. Everybody thought the dragon, the last dragon, was vulnerable. Now he's supercharged dragon, blows apart the Iron Fleet. They can't hit they can't hit the broadside of a barn. But the episode before, that inconsistency there is also very, very bad, and it's also unfulfilling, and they should be criticized about. Not only that, but after Drogon blows apart the Iron Fleet, I mean, he goes and blows apart the entire Golden Company by coming through King's Landing and blows apart this entire section of the wall that looks like he has enough dragon fire for an army of dragons. I mean, did Einstein give him Dany the formula for the A-bomb and they're projecting it through Drogon's breath? Give me a break. Again, the discrepancy is disappointing. Disappointing. And Dany ends up blowing up everybody, and there is the moment everybody has an issue with, and that is Dany going mad, losing her shit, going postal. Could happen to anybody. Happened to her. They didn't do a good job of building it up. That was the big criticism That was a huge criticism. Is all of a sudden she just flips, and all the feminists out there, all the people out there who named her Dolores Daenerys are now upset because she flipped like that. It was meant for her to flip. I will say that the foreshadowing, the talking about it, was meant for her to flip. But the build-up was horrible. It was horrible. I mean, they could have spent an entire season building. I mean, that right there would have been great television. But they didn't. They didn't. She just said, the hell with it. I'm going postal. But rather than going postal, they could have had it tied to her slow fall into madness. Did we all not see Stephen King? I'm not a big fan of Stephen King. But look at Jack Nicklaus's his role. I mean, a slow descent into madness. It would have been great for a season, but we didn't get that. Because the two writers wanted to go to Star Wars and screw that up. So we're left with Dany just starting to blow apart King's Landing. This is the part where Jon and Grey Worm and Davos, who I'm still as happy he's alive, he's one of my favorite characters, are meeting up with the Lannisters' army who throw down their swords. And Grey Worm let me just pause here. Again, the disconnect between the physical toll, the travel down from Winterfell, the battle they went through with the Night King and the White Walkers. You don't see that at all in these soldiers. I mean, if you're a soldier who just went through hell and the other side just threw down the swords, you think you breathe a sigh of relief. But no. Grey Worm is really pissed off, even though they were very disciplined soldiers. He's pissed off, so he impales one of the Lannister soldiers, and then they start killing each other. Jon Snow lost his spine. Jon Snow lost his spine. It's still on the same table where he was resurrected from. He looks around, figures, hey, something's wrong here. Maybe we should stop in that moment of clarity. But no, the writers completely keep on destroying Jon Snow, who is the hero of the show. Well, Martin had him built up as the hero of the show until the two Dumbledores got a hold of Arya and made her superpowered. I can't stand Grey Worm. I'm sorry, I never have. So another criticism of this entire episode is Cersei. Cersei has been a fantastic villain. I mean, go back and look at the earlier episode. Look at Cersei. I mean, look. Lena Headey is probably one of the best actors in the entire show. But this entire season, you know what she does? She just sits by the window and looks over the King's Landing. Ugh. And that's what she does. Just, looks over King's Landing. They couldn't have found a way for her to exploit that any better. Not only that, but psychologically, she knows to use the dragon fire to blow up the Tyrells, which ended up leading to Tommen's death, and the Sept. But she didn't use the same tactics against Dany's army. It doesn't, again, the precedence is already set there. There's no depth that these two writers had that Martin provided earlier in the series. And again, I still contend the fact that the earlier seasons are better because you have a worldly view of things. Whereas this is so confined to King's Landing and Winterfell, you forget that Westeros and Essos exist. But let's continue on. Another thing, Euron and Jaime meeting. They destroyed Jaime, which I'm really pissed about. His entire arc was about redemption. They just, please said, the hell with that. He's going to go back and get Cersei. Even though Cersei tried to have him killed by Bronn. Whatever. I mean, we're at that point. But again, the episode was entertaining, right, people? That's all that matters is entertaining. Throw out logic. The hell with logic. Absolute shit. So Euron, who just got blown off his ship, swims a few miles ashore, and Jaime just happens to be there. I'm not going to say any more about that. It's stupid. Just stupid. And Jaime and Cersei end up running each other. Again, great piece of acting. But it destroys Jaime's character, who he is. I guess, people wanted Jaime to kill Cersei, and that would have been a good arc. And loving Brace and and kill her with a dagger. But I guess they're saving that for Snow and Daenerys next episode. I guess they didn't want to have too many of those scenes. And then, of course, Jaime and Cersei end up going out being crushed by rocks. It's probably under the weight of the bullshit of this episode. Crushed by rocks. Again, pathetic. An Arya just going with Sandor up to before Clegane Bowl, which I'm not going to comment. I'm really upset about how that occurred. Again, should have had its own moment, not mashed in with all this nonsense. But Arya, whose entire arc was a list, Cersei was high among that list. Given the opportunity, she could have killed him. She serves the fate, she serves death. But guess what? She decides to turn around at the last second. Travels all the way to kill Cersei. The King's Landing and just turns around. Then she runs through the city while everybody's getting crushed by rocks, and somehow she makes it out. Because that's super Arya. Super Arya. I know it seems like I'm being a contrarian, but the point of the matter is this entire season has been a debacle. Has been a complete debacle, and it's apparent that the writers just want to get it over with. And that's sad. Besides episode 2, which I thought was fantastic, and Brian Cogman, who is the backup writer, did a great job with that, with all the characters. You didn't get that. Their send-offs have just been horrible. DB and David has completely pissed all over the series. And they're going to piss over the finale. Trust me. The finale is going to be the stake in the heart of the legacy of this show. But anyway. But I have decided, this show, subversion over story arc, just terrible writing. But I said, I've decided that next year we're going to be getting this prequel to Game of Thrones. And Martin is going to be involved with that. And that prequel will take place, 5,000 years before this. It'll take place during the Age of Heroes. So as part of JB's Driving Podcast, I think I will continue talking about Game of Thrones and the development of that show. I'm looking forward to it because it's going to be taking place in what is known as the Age of Heroes, and that's more or less the Bronze Age of Westeros. Should be exciting. I know I haven't been full of energy this short episode. It's disappointing seeing this. I mean, these characters deserve better. They really did. And they just blew it off for Star Wars. And make sure it's Maryland Podcast Month here in the state of Maryland. Go to Maryland Podcast Month on Facebook, and you can listen to a bunch of other podcasts that are part of the Maryland networking. Some good shows out there. Appreciate Red Maryland putting together. Make sure you listen to Paul and I's regular show, JB's Driving Podcast. We just wrapped up Jurassic Park, and Jaws is coming. And Jaws is a very good episode. Paul and I think we did a really good job with that. And make sure to download the last episode of this short-lived podcast, the last 4 episodes of Game of Thrones. I got to be honest. I know what happens. I'm disappointed. I'm really disappointed. That's why you probably hear the dejection in my voice. Very disappointed. Doesn't make sense. Terrible writing. Anyway, make sure to catch me on that episode. Hopefully I can release that sooner than later, because it means a lot. Then, as I said, up until next year when the prequel is released, I'll be updating progress on that slowly with these short little podcasts. With that being said, make sure to follow us on JB's Driving through all our social media and then Stitcher, SoundCloud. Do what you need to do with iTunes. Leave us some reviews. Appreciate it. You all have a good one.